What if I told you that the most powerful ruler in African history was a 12-year-old girl who watched her entire family murdered before her eyes? What if I told you that a child who was dismissed as too young, too weak, too small would outsmart seasoned generals, defeat grown warriors, and build an empire that lasted centuries? This is not a fairy tale. This is the true story of Queen Amara of Akusum, the girl who became a legend not through magic or luck, but through pure intelligence and unbreakable will. Tonight, you will witness how a child's mind can be deadlier than any sword, how patience can conquer armies, and how the smallest person in the room can become the most powerful force in the kingdom. You will see a 12-year-old girl play chess with men's lives while they didn't even realize the game had begun. You will watch betrayal so shocking, it will make your blood boil. Loyalty so pure, it will bring tears to your eyes. And revenge so perfectly calculated that it will make you stand up and cheer. But I warn you, this story will break your heart before it lifts your spirit. It will make you rage against those who underestimate the young, and it will prove that true royalty has nothing to do with age and everything to do with courage, intelligence, and an iron will that cannot be broken. So, prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear is the legend of how the youngest queen in history became the greatest ruler Africa had ever seen, and how she did it all before her 17th birthday. Long ago, in the mighty kingdom of Aksum, where ancient obelisks touched the sky and trade routes connected 3 continents, there ruled a king whose wisdom was matched only by his love for his family. The kingdom was a jewel of Africa, where gold flowed like rivers, and merchants came from lands as distant as Rome and India. King Yanari was everything a ruler should be, just in his judgment, fierce in battle, generous to his people, and blessed with 5 children who would carry on his legacy. His queen, Makena, was known throughout the land not only for her beauty and grace, but for her intelligence and compassion that made even foreign diplomats respect her counsel. But it was in the shadows of this perfect kingdom that jealousy grew like a cancer, fed by 20 years of resentment and watered with the bitter tears of ambition denied. For there was one man who had given everything to the crown, but would never wear it himself. The royal family of Akusum was the envy of neighboring kingdoms. King Yenari's 4 sons were being groomed as future leaders, each excelling in different areas that would serve the kingdom well. Tadesse, the eldest at 19, would inherit the throne and had already proven himself a capable administrator. Berehen, 17, was the brilliant strategist whose military plans had secured their borders without bloodshed. Hakim, 15, commanded respect from soldiers twice his age and had never lost a battle. Young David, at 14, showed remarkable talent for diplomacy and could speak 7 languages fluently. But it was their youngest child who truly captured the heart of the kingdom. Princess Amara, at 12 years old, was small for her age, with large, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything and understand even more. While her brothers learned sword fighting and horseback riding, Amara spent her time in the royal library, in the markets listening to merchants, and in the palace corridors observing the intricate dance of politics and power. She's too curious for her own good, Queen Makena would say with fond exasperation when Amara would appear at state meetings, sitting quietly in the corner and absorbing every word. Curiosity is not a flaw in a future ruler, King Yanari would reply, watching his youngest daughter with pride. She may be small, but her mind is already sharper than many of my advisors. What none of them realized was that Amara's constant observation had made her aware of things that escaped even the king's attention. She noticed the way certain guards exchanged glances during meetings, the forced quality of General Kofi's smiles, and the growing tension in private conversations that stopped when she entered the room. The Feast of Harvest was the grandest celebration of the year, when nobles from across the kingdom gathered to celebrate another year of prosperity. The great hall blazed with 1,000 candles, and tables groaned under the weight of exotic foods from every corner of their trading empire. King Yanari sat on his throne, surrounded by his family, his heart full as he watched nobles and commoners alike celebrate together. This was what he had worked for, a kingdom where prosperity was shared, where justice was fair, where even the lowliest farmer could approach the throne with grievances. Princess Amara sat beside her mother dressed in silk the color of sunrise, observing everything with those discerning eyes. While her brothers laughed and joked with visiting dignitaries, she noticed things others missed. The way General Kofi kept checking the positions of certain guards, how some men she didn't know were stationed near every exit, and the nervous energy that seemed to crackle beneath the celebration. "Mama," she whispered to McKenna during a lull in the festivities, "why are there so many new guards tonight? And why do they keep looking at us instead of watching for threats from outside?" McKenna followed her daughter's gaze, her own expression growing troubled as she noticed what Amara had observed. "Perhaps we should mention this to your father," she said quietly. But before they could act on their instincts, General Kofi rose to his feet, raising his wine cup high. "My king, my queen, noble lords and ladies," he called out, his voice carrying across the great hall. "I propose a toast to the royal family of Aksum. May their reign be long and their legacy eternal." The hall erupted in cheers and raised cups. It was the perfect moment for a loyal general to honor his sovereigns. It was also the perfect signal for betrayal. As King Yenari stood to acknowledge the toast, General Kofi gave an almost imperceptible nod to the guards stationed throughout the hall. What happened next would be seared into the memory of every survivor for the rest of their lives. The attack came like lightning, sudden, brutal, and perfectly coordinated. Guards who had sworn sacred oaths to protect the royal family suddenly turned their swords against them. The great hall erupted in chaos as guests screamed and fled, but there was nowhere to run. Every exit was blocked by Kofi's conspirators. King Yanari reached for the ceremonial sword at his side, but General Kofi was already there, moving with deadly efficiency of a man who had planned this moment for years. "You were a good king, Yanari, but your time is over." As his blade found its mark, the king fell, his crown rolling across the blood-stained stones, and Queen McKenna's scream of anguish pierced the air above the sounds of battle. She threw herself over her husband's body, and Kofi's sword found her too, ending her cries forever. One by one, the princes of Akusim died. Tadesse fought bravely, his sword flashing as he tried to reach his parents, but he was overwhelmed by numbers. Berehen attempted to rally the loyal guards, shouting orders even as assassins closed in around him. Hakim died with his back to his youngest brother, protecting Dawit unto the very end. And 14-year-old Dawit, the gentle diplomat who had never wanted to hurt anyone, called out for his mother as the life left his eyes. Through it all, Princess Amara remained motionless behind a marble pillar, invisible in the chaos that consumed the great hall. Her maid, Nia, had pulled her there at the first sign of trouble, pressing the child's small body into the shadows and whispering urgently, "Stay hidden, little princess. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, stay hidden and stay silent." In the space of 20 minutes, a royal line that had ruled for 3 centuries was wiped out, all except for one small girl whose existence the killers had forgotten in their bloodlust. For hours after the slaughter ended, Amara remained motionless behind the pillar, her body shaking with silent sobs as Nia held her close. The great hall, which had echoed with laughter just hours before, now held only the groans of the wounded and the quiet conversations of Kofi's men as they searched for survivals to eliminate. "We must move, little princess," Nia whispered when the palace finally fell quiet. "There are places in this ancient palace that not even General Kofi knows about, places where the first kings hid during times of war." The loyal servant had served the royal family for 30 years and knew every secret passage, every hidden chamber that honeycombed the ancient palace like a vast underground city. These passages had saved royal lives during invasions and coups throughout history, and tonight they would save the last princess of Akusin. Through narrow corridors carved from living rock, past chambers filled with treasure of forgotten kings, they made their way to the deepest sanctuary beneath the palace. Here, surrounded by golden artifacts and ancient scrolls, Princess Amara finally found her voice. "They're all gone," she whispered, the words seeming too large and terrible for her small throat. "Papa, Mama, Tadesse, Berehen, Hakim, Dawit, they're all dead, aren't they?" Naya knelt before the child, taking small, trembling hands in her weathered ones. "Yes, princess. General Kofi has murdered them all. By morning, he will claim the throne and declare himself king." "But I'm alive," Amara said, as if testing the truth of the words. "And the last one left." "You are more than that," Naya said firmly. "You are your father's daughter and your mother's legacy. You are the rightful queen of Aksam, and as long as you draw breath, General Kofi is nothing but a usurper sitting on a stalling throne." As dawn approached, they could hear Kofi's voice echoing through the palace corridors, spinning his carefully crafted lies. "Bandits attacked during the feast, foreign assassins sent by our enemies. The royal family fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed by numbers. I tried to save them, but I arrived too late." Amara listened to the performance with growing fury. Not the hot, uncontrolled rage of a child, but something colder and more dangerous. "He is very convincing," she said quietly. "The people will believe him." "For now," Naya agreed. "But lies have a way of unraveling when the light of truth shines on them." "Then we must be very patient," Amara said, and in her voice was the first hint of the queen she would become. "General Kofi thinks he has won because he has eliminated the obvious threats, but he has made one crucial mistake." "What mistake is that, little princess?" Amara's eyes, red from crying but sharp with intelligence, looked up at her protector. "He has forgotten that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you don't see coming, and right now I am invisible to him." 3 days after the massacre, while the kingdom still reeled from the shock of losing its royal family, Princess Amara made her first calculated move. She bathed, dressed in the finest clothes Naya could find, and walked into the throne room where General Kofi was holding his first official court as the self-proclaimed regent. The great hall, still being cleaned of bloodstains from the massacre, fell silent as the small figure appeared in the doorway. Nobles who had been discussing trade agreements and military deployments stopped mid-sentence, some gasping as if they were seeing a ghost. General Kofi, who had been sitting on the throne that rightfully belonged to her family, went pale at the sight of her. But he was a skilled politician who had survived court intrigue for 2 decades, and he recovered quickly, his expression shifting to one of theatrical relief and joy. "Princess Amara," he exclaimed, rising from the throne and spreading his arms wide. "Blessed be the ancestors, you survived. When we searched the palace and couldn't find you, I feared the worst. Where have you been hiding, child?" "I have not been hiding, General Kofi. I have been grieving, and now I have come to claim what belongs to me." She walked slowly toward the throne, her small feet making no sound on the ancient stones, but her presence filling the room with an energy that made even grown men step back to give her passage. "The throne of Axum belongs to me by right of birth, by right of blood, and by the sacred laws that have governed this kingdom for 1,000 years. I am Princess Amara, daughter of King Gennari, last of the royal bloodline. I claim my crown." The silence that followed her words was broken by nervous laughter from several nobles. Lord Desta, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, shook his head with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Princess," he said, gently, as if speaking to a confused child, "you are but 12 years old. You have suffered a terrible trauma. The kingdom needs strong leadership in these troubled times, someone with experience in warfare, in diplomacy, in the harsh realities of ruling." "I need no one to rule in my place," Amara replied, firmly. "I am ready to take the throne now." What happened next stunned everyone present and announced to the kingdom that this was no ordinary child seeking comfort after tragedy. Princess Amara began to speak with an authority and knowledge that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Lord Desta," she said, turning to face the powerful noble directly, "you mentioned the need for experience in ruling. Tell me, what is your greatest concern about the coming winter?" Lord Desta blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. Well, the grain stores, of course. The harvest was adequate, but you're worried specifically about the southern provinces where the late rains reduced yields by 15%, Amara interrupted smoothly. "You've calculated that we have enough grain overall, but you're concerned about distribution costs and political implications of redirecting surplus from wealthy northern provinces to help the south." The hall was dead quiet. The grain situation was supposed to be confidential information, discussed only in the most private council meetings. "The solution is obvious," Amara continued. "We renegotiate our transportation contract with the river merchants of Yeha. Their boat-building industry has been struggling since the peace treaty with Kush reduced demand for military vessels. If we offer them exclusive contracts for grain transport, we can reduce our cost by 30% while providing employment for their craftsmen. This creates loyalty through mutual benefit rather than requiring us to use force or political pressure." Lord Desta's mouth fell open. This was not just knowledge of the problem, this was a sophisticated solution that had escaped his own advisors. "Lady Hanan," Amara turned to another noble without missing a beat. "Your son wishes to marry Chief Abraha's daughter from the Eastern Territories. You support the match personally, but worry about the political implications." Lady Hanan nearly dropped her wine cup, her face going white. This information had been shared only within her immediate family. "Your concern is that Chief Abraha has remained neutral in recent regional conflicts, and you fear this neutrality might be seen as weakness or unreliability. But you're wrong to worry. Chief Abraha's neutrality comes from wisdom, not weakness. He has kept his people safe while other tribes exhausted themselves in pointless wars. A marriage alliance with him would secure our eastern borders without requiring military resources, and it would demonstrate that we value intelligence over aggression in our allies." One by one, she demonstrated knowledge that no 12-year-old should have possessed. She knew about trade routes and profit margins, military deployment and diplomatic negotiations, family secrets and political alliances. She had been watching, listening, and learning while everyone dismissed her as just a child. But more than knowledge, she displayed wisdom, the ability to see connections others missed, to find solutions that benefited multiple parties,
to understand the deeper currents that moved beneath the surface of political decisions. General Kofi's discomfort was becoming visible to everyone in the hall. This was not the frightened little girl he had expected to manipulate or eliminate. Impressive knowledge for one so young, he said carefully. But knowledge and wisdom are different things, princess. Leadership requires making difficult decisions, sometimes cruel ones. It requires the strength to do what must be done even when it causes pain. A child cannot what? Amara interrupted, her young voice suddenly sharp as a blade. Cannot make difficult decisions. General Kofi, I have already made the most difficult decision possible to claim my birthright, knowing that doing so puts my life in danger from those who benefit from my family's deaths. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Without directly accusing him, she had reminded everyone present that she was the sole survivor of a massacre that conveniently eliminated all rivals to his power. Cannot be cruel when necessary, she continued, her eyes never leaving his face. You speak of cruelty as if it was a virtue. In your 20 years of service, how many of your cruel but necessary decisions actually made the kingdom stronger?
How many created loyalty that didn't require swords to maintain it? It was a trap, elegantly laid. Any examples he gave would remind people of his harsh methods and questionable decisions, but failing to answer would make him appear weak and ineffective. True leadership, Amara said into the silence, inspires people to follow because they believe in something better, not because they are afraid of what happens if they don't. Fear may be quick, General Kofi, but loyalty is permanent. In the days that followed Princess Amara's dramatic appearance in court, the kingdom found itself with two centers of power: General Kofi's official authority, backed by military force, and the young princess's growing influence, built on something much more dangerous: genuine respect and carefully cultivated loyalty. While Kofi held meetings with powerful nobles and military commanders, Amara spent her time in places that powerful men never thought to look. She could be found in the palace kitchens, learning the names of every servant's children. She visited the stables, asking the grooms about their horses and their families. She walked through the markets, stopping to talk with merchants and craftspeople about their trades and their troubles. To those who judge power by its obvious displays, this looked like the behavior of a child who didn't understand real politics. But Amara understood something that the adult had forgotten. Information flows through every level of society, and often the most valuable intelligence comes from those who are invisible to the powerful. Who knows more about Lord Desta's private business? She asked Nia as they walked through the servants' quarters. Lord Desta himself, or the maid who cleans his study and overhears his private conversations? The maid, of course. But what can a servant do with that knowledge? Everything, Amara said with a slight smile, if they have someone who knows how to use it properly. She began solving problems that no one expected a royal to notice, much less care about. When the baker's young son fell ill with fever, palace physicians mysteriously appeared at his bedside. When the stable master's daughter expressed a desire to learn reading, tutoring was quietly arranged. When a merchant complained of unfair taxation, the issue was resolved through channels that bypassed the official bureaucracy entirely. Word spread through the invisible network of common people that had always existed but had never been acknowledged by the powerful. The young princess was different. She remembered names. She cared about problems that seemed small to nobles but were enormous to ordinary people. And somehow, miraculously, she had the power to actually help. Meanwhile, she continued to demonstrate her unusual capabilities in more formal settings. When trade disputes arose between merchants, she proposed solutions that satisfied all parties while increasing the kingdom's revenue.
When military matters were discussed, she asked questions that revealed flaws in proposed strategies that experienced commanders had missed. Elder Kwaku, the oldest advisor in the kingdom and a man who had served 4 different rulers, began watching her with increasing fascination. General Kofi, he said after one particularly impressive display of political insight, perhaps we should give more serious consideration to Princess Amara's suggestions. She is a clever child, Kofi replied dismissively. But cleverness is not the same thing as wisdom. She lacks the experience to understand the full consequences of the decisions a ruler must make. But Elder Kwaku had lived through many reigns, many crises, many ambitious men who had sought the throne for their own benefit. He recognized something in Princess Amara that others missed. She wasn't trying to impress anyone with displays of knowledge. Every move she made was calculated, purposeful, building towards some larger goal that only she could see. Captain Jengo had served King Jenari faithfully for 5 years, rising through the ranks based on merit rather than birth or connections. He was young for his position, only 25, but he had earned the respect of his men through courage in battle and fairness in command. When the royal family was massacred, he had expected to find Princess Amara broken by trauma, a frightened child in need of protection and comfort. But he encountered a young leader who seemed to understand military strategy better than some of his fellow officers. Captain Jengo, she said to him privately after she had suggested improvements to the palace guard rotations that would increase security while reducing the number of men needed for each shift. May I ask you something? Of course, Princess. Do you believe General Kofi's story about what happened to my family? The question was asked quietly, but it hit Jengo like a physical blow. He had been troubled by inconsistencies in the official account. Why had the bandits targeted only the royal family? Why had they disappeared so completely? Why had General Kofi been absent from the feast until the very end? What do you think happened, Princess? Asked Ye carefully. I think, Amara said, choosing her words with the precision of someone much older, that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we trust the most. I think that loyalty is a choice, not an obligation. And I think that a person's actions over time reveal their true character more clearly than their words in any single moment. She paused, looking out the window toward the training grounds where soldiers practiced their weapon skills. Captain Jengo, you have always served my family honorably. When the time comes to choose between competing claims of loyalty, I hope you will remember that honor is more important than convenience and that the right choice is not always the easy choice. It was not quite an accusation against General Kofi, not quite a request for support, but it was clearly a challenge for him to examine his own beliefs about what had really happened that terrible night. As weeks passed, more and more people began to notice the same pattern. The kingdom was developing 2 distinct centers of power: General Kofi's official authority based on military force and political tradition, and Princess Amara's growing influence built on intelligence, genuine care for people's welfare, and an increasingly obvious moral authority. The child everyone had dismissed as too young, too small, too traumatized to matter was quietly building a coalition of support that crossed all boundaries of class, profession, and social status. Servants and nobles, soldiers and merchants, scholars and craftspeople all began to whisper the same question among themselves. What if the 12-year-old princess was right? What if she really could rule better than the experienced general who had seized power? What if age was less important than wisdom and size was less important than strength of character? General Kofi still held the throne and commanded the army, but Princess Amara was winning something far more valuable: the hearts and minds of the people who would ultimately determine which of them deserved to rule the kingdom of Axon. The real battle for the crown had only just begun. 6 months after the massacre, the delicate balance of power in Axon began to shift dramatically. Princess Amara had spent the time building her network while carefully avoiding direct confrontation with General Kofi. But patience, she had learned, was as much a weapon as any sword, and the time for waiting was coming to an end. The first real test came when news arrived that would change everything. A messenger exhausted from hard riding brought word that bandits were raiding villages on the kingdom's northern border. But these were not ordinary bandits. They were well organized, well armed, and seemed to know exactly which caravans carried the most valuable goods. General Kofi immediately called for a military response. "We will send 3 companies of soldiers to hunt down these criminals," he announced to the assembled court. "That would be a mistake," Princess Amara said quietly, from her place at the side of the throne room. The hall fell silent. For 6 months, she had offered suggestions and demonstrated knowledge, but she had never directly contradicted General Kofi in public. This was new territory for everyone. "Explain yourself, child," Kofi said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "The raids follow a pattern," Amara replied, stepping forward so everyone could see and hear her clearly. "They strike only at night. They target specific caravans carrying luxury goods rather than grain or practical supplies. And they retreat immediately toward the eastern mountains after each attack." She moved to the great map that dominated one wall of the throne room, her small finger tracing routes and locations. "This suggests that they have detailed intelligence about caravan schedules and content. That information comes from only 3 possible sources: the merchants themselves, the customs officials who inspect the goods, or the military commanders who provide escort assignments." A murmur ran through the assembled nobles. She was implying corruption at high levels, a dangerous accusation.
Furthermore, Amara continued, the retreat pattern suggests they have a permanent base in the eastern mountains, probably in the caves near the old silver mines. Sending soldiers to hunt them in open country is exactly what they expect us to do. It's also exactly why they'll escape every time. General Kofi's face was darkening with anger, but before he could respond, Elder Kwaku spoke up. "What do you propose instead, Princess?" "We don't hunt them," Amara said simply. "We trap them." What followed was a display of strategic thinking that left even hardened military officers impressed. Princess Amara outlined a plan that involved spreading false information about a particularly valuable caravan, setting up what appeared to be a normal military escort, but actually positioning troops to cut off the bandits' escape route before they even knew they were walking into a trap. "The key is patience," she explained. "Let them think they are succeeding. Let them become overconfident. Then, when they commit to the attack, we close the net from all sides." Captain Django, who had been studying the map as she spoke, nodded slowly. "It could work," he said, "but it would require precise timing and absolute secrecy. And it would require trusting the judgment of a 12-year-old girl," General Kofi added sarcastically. 13, Amara corrected calmly. "I had a birthday last month. And yes, it would require trusting judgment based on careful analysis rather than assumptions based on age." The challenge was unmistakable. General Kofi could either accept her plan and risk looking weak if it failed, or reject it and risk looking foolish if his own approach proved unsuccessful. "Very well," he said finally. "We will try your plan, Princess, but if it fails, the responsibility and the consequences will be yours alone." "I accept those terms," Amara replied without hesitation. "But if it succeeds, I expect the same acceptance of responsibility for its success."
2 weeks later, the false caravan made its way along the mountain road, apparently loaded with gold and precious stones from the southern mines. The escort seemed light, only 20 soldiers, led by Captain Django, riding in the standard formation that had protected royal caravans for decades. What the watching bandits couldn't see were the additional 100 soldiers hidden in the forest on both sides of the road, positioned according to Princess Amara's precise calculations. What they couldn't know was that the precious cargo was actually rocks and sand, while the real trap was the soldiers they couldn't see. Princess Amara herself was hidden among the rocks above the road, accompanied only by Naya and 2 trusted guards. General Kofi had forbidden her to participate directly, but she pointed out that someone needed to coordinate the timing of the trap, and no one else understood the plan as completely as she did. As the sun set, the bandits struck exactly as she had predicted. Nearly 50 armed men descended from the eastern slopes, moving with the confidence of those who had executed similar raids many times. They surrounded the caravan, demanded surrender, and prepared to make off with their prize. That was when Princess Amara gave the signal. The hidden soldiers emerged from the forest like spirits materializing from shadow. The bandits found themselves surrounded, their escape routes blocked, their carefully planned raid transformed into a desperate fight for survival. But even in the moment of victory, Amara displayed wisdom beyond her years. Instead of ordering a massacre, she had instructed Captain Jembo to offer surrender to any bandit who laid down his weapons. "We need them alive," she had explained during the planning. "Dead bandits can't tell us who was providing them with information about caravan schedules." The battle was brief and decisive. Half the bandits surrendered immediately when they realized their situation was hopeless. Most of the others were captured alive. Only a handful died fighting, and none of the kingdom's soldiers were seriously injured. When the prisoners were brought back to the capital, Princess Amara's real plan began to unfold. Under careful interrogation, conducted with fairness but firm persistence, the captured bandits revealed what she had suspected from the beginning. They had been receiving detailed information about caravans from someone within the kingdom's own government. The name they gave was Lord Johan Johannes, one of General Kofi's own appointees to the Customs Bureau. The revelation of Lord Johannes' betrayal sent shockwaves through the royal court. Here was proof that General Kofi's administration was either corrupt or incompetent, possibly both. But Princess Amara was far from finished with her investigation. Lord Johannes could not have acted alone, she explained to the assembled court, as the disgraced noble was brought forward in chains. The information he provided was too detailed, too current. He had help from someone with access to military escort assignments. What followed was a masterclass in political maneuvering. Princess Amara had spent months building relationships with palace servants, stable hands, and minor officials, people that saw everything but were rarely noticed by those in power. Now that network proved its value. "Ato Bekele," she called out, and a nervous-looking stable hand stepped forward. "Tell the court what you observed about Lord Johannes' meetings over the past 3 months." The man's testimony revealed a pattern of secret meetings, coded messages, and payments that painted a picture of corruption reaching much deeper than anyone had suspected. Other witnesses followed: a kitchen servant who had overheard conversations, a groom who had noticed unusual travel patterns, a merchant who had been pressured to provide information about his competitors. One by one, the threads of the conspiracy were laid bare. Lord Johannes had not been working alone. He had been a part of a network that included 2 other customs officials, a military supply officer, and most damaging of all, one of General Kofi's own trusted advisors. General Kofi's face grew darker with each revelation. This was not just corruption. This was a direct challenge to his authority and competence. It was a challenge orchestrated by a 13-year-old girl who was making him look foolish in front of the entire court. "Princess," he said when the testimony was finished, "you have uncovered serious crimes and the kingdom is in your debt. But I must ask, how did you know to look for this conspiracy in the first place?" It was a dangerous question because it implied she might have had prior knowledge of the corruption, knowledge that could have come only from her own involvement or from sources that General Kofi didn't control. "I knew to look," Amara replied calmly, "because I pay attention to patterns that others ignore. When the same types of caravans are repeatedly targeted while others are left alone, when raids happen at convenient times for the attackers but inconvenient times for the merchants, when escape routes are consistently successful despite military pursuit, these things suggest inside information." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But most importantly, I knew to look because I listened to the people you dismiss as important. The servants, the guards, the merchants, they see everything, General Kofi. They just need someone who values the observations enough to ask the right questions." The implication was clear. While General Kofi had been focused on maintaining control through force and political maneuvering, Princess Amara had been building genuine relationships with people at every level of society. Her network of information was not based on fear or obligation, but on mutual respect and shared interest. The successful resolution of the bandit crisis and the exposure of the corruption network marked a turning point in the struggle for power in Aksum. Princess Amara had demonstrated that she possessed not only intelligent and strategic thinking, but also the ability to build and manage complex operations that achieved real results. More importantly, she had shown that her approach to leadership, based on listening to all people rather than just the powerful, on understanding root causes rather than just addressing symptoms, on building consensus rather than simply imposing authority, could produce better outcomes than traditional methods. The court began to divide into factions. On one side were those who supported General Kofi out of fear, habit, or genuine belief that experience mattered more than innovation. On the other side were those who increasingly saw Princess Amara as a legitimate alternative, not just a child to be protected, but a leader to be followed. Elder Kwaku was among the first to openly express his changing views. "General Kofi," he said during a private council meeting, "I have served this kingdom for 40 years, and I have never seen such effective governance from someone so young. Perhaps it is time to consider a formal transition of power." "She is 13 years old," Kofi exploded. "A child. The neighboring kingdoms will see weakness. They will think we can be conquered by any warlord with a handful of soldiers." "Will they?" Elder Kwaku asked mildly. "Or will they see a kingdom that has produced a leader so capable that age becomes irrelevant?" Princess Amara has already demonstrated military strategic thinking, political acumen, and administrative competence. What more do you require? Captain Jengo, emboldened by the elder's support, added his own voice. "My men respect her, General Kofi. They've seen what she can do. When she gives orders, they are followed not because of her title, but because her orders make sense and achieve results." Other voices joined the discussion, some supporting Princess Amara, others defending General Kofi's position, all recognizing that the kingdom was approaching a moment of decision that could not be postponed indefinitely.
But General Kofi was not prepared to surrender power to anyone, least of all to a teenage girl who made him look incompetent by comparison. If persuasion and political maneuvering would not secure his position, he was prepared to use other methods. As the meeting ended and the nobles departed, General Kofi remained behind with his most trusted subordinates, men whose loyalty was based on shared corruption rather than shared principles. "The girl has become a problem," he said quietly, "a problem that requires a permanent solution." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Princess Amara had survived one massacre, but General Kofi was beginning to plan another, this one targeted specifically at eliminating the growing threat to his stolen throne. General Kofi's decision to eliminate Princess Amara was not made in anger or desperation, but with the cold calculation of a man who had already committed murder to gain power and was prepared to do so again to keep it. But this time, the circumstances were more complex. The princess was no longer an overlooked child who could disappear without questions being asked. She had become a public figure with supporters throughout the kingdom. It must appear to be an accident, Kofi explained to his inner circle of conspirators in the privacy of his chambers. Or better yet, the work of our enemies from outside the kingdom. The people must believe that foreign agents killed her to weaken Axum. Captain Desta, one of Kofi's most reliable subordinates, nodded grimly. There have been reports of Kushite spies in the eastern provinces. We could arrange for evidence to be found, weapons, documents, anything that points to them. No, interrupted Lord Fasil, another conspirator. Too obvious. Better to make it look like bandits, the same ones she was so clever in catching, a revenge killing by their surviving allies. General Kofi considered both options, then shook his head. Neither will work. Too many people know that the bandits we captured have provided information about their entire network. And blaming the Kushites would require us to declare war, which the council would resist. He walked to the window that looked out over the palace courtyard, where Princess Amara could be seen talking with a group of young soldiers, apparently discussing some aspect of their training. It must be something that discredits her even in death, he said slowly. Something that makes people question whether she was really as wise as they believed. What Kofi devised was more subtle and more cruel than a simple assassination. Princess Amara would die, but she would die in a way that made her death serve his political purposes. The plan was elaborate and required careful timing. During the upcoming festival of the new moon, when the palace would be filled with visitors from across the kingdom, Princess Amara would be invited to demonstrate her military knowledge by reviewing defensive preparations for a theoretical enemy attack. She would be taken to the old watchtower on the eastern wall, supposedly to observe the guard rotations and suggest improvements. The watchtower was ancient, and its stone stairs were known to be treacherous, especially in the dark. It would be unfortunate if the young princess, eager to prove her capabilities, lost her footing and fell to her death. Even more unfortunate that her fall would occur because she had been attempting a dangerous inspection that more experienced advisors had warned against. Her death becomes proof that she was reckless, Kofi explained to his conspirators, too young, too eager to take risks she didn't understand. The people will mourn her, but they'll also remember that this is what happens when children try to do adult work. But Princess Amara had not spent the past year building a network of loyal supporters without learning how to protect herself from exactly this kind of threat. Her web of servants, guards, and minor officials had grown into an intelligent system that rivaled anything the kingdom had ever seen. 3 days before the planned assassination, a kitchen servant named Almaz approached Nia with disturbing news. She had been serving wine during one of General Kofi's private meetings and had overheard enough to understand that the princess was in grave danger. They planned to kill her during the festival, Almaz whispered urgently. Something about the watchtower and making it look like an accident. Nia brought this information to Princess Amara immediately, expecting to find her frightened or at least concerned. Instead, she found her young charge studying maps and documents with the focused intensity of a general preparing for battle. "You don't seem surprised," Nia observed. "I'm not," Amara replied without looking up from her work. "I've been expecting this for weeks. General Kofi has run out of political options. Violence is his only remaining strategy." "Then we must flee," Nia said urgently. "We can leave tonight, seek shelter in one of the outer provinces until—" "No," Amara's voice was firm. "Running away proves that he was right about my age and inexperience. It confirms that I'm just a frightened child who got lucky a few times. If I flee now, I'll never have another chance to claim my throne." "But if you stay, you'll die." Princess Amara finally looked up from her papers, and Nia was struck by how much her girl's eyes had changed over the past year.
They still held kindness and intelligence, but now they also held something harder. The cold calculation of someone who had learned that survival required thinking several moves ahead of one's enemies. "I'll die only if I play by his rules," Amara said calmly. "But I don't intend to do that. General Kofi thinks he's setting a trap for me, but he's actually walking into one himself." What Princess Amara had planned was more than just avoiding assassination. It was a complete reversal that would expose General Kofi's true nature to the entire kingdom at the moment when his crimes could not be denied or explained away. She had spent months positioning her supporters in key locations throughout the palace and the city. Captain Jengo now commanded the loyalty of more soldiers than remained faithful to General Kofi. Elder Kaku had quietly won over most of the noble council. Even many of Kofi's own appointees had begun to question their allegiance as evidence of his corruption and incompetence accumulated. The festival would indeed be the moment of final confrontation, but Princess Amara intended to control how that confrontation unfolded. The festival of the new moon had been celebrated in Aksum for over 1,000 years, marking the beginning of the agricultural cycle and the renewal of oaths of loyalty to the crown. This year's festival carried special significance. It would be the first since the massacre of the royal family, and many saw it as a test of whether the kingdom could truly move forward under General Kofi's leadership. The palace courtyard was packed with nobles, merchants, soldiers, and common citizens who had come to participate in the traditional ceremonies. Banners flew from every tower, musicians filled the air with celebratory songs, and long tables groaned under the weight of food prepared for thousands of guests. Princess Amara appeared at the festival wearing a dress of royal blue silk that had belonged to her mother, along with a simple circlet of gold that had been worn by queens of Aksum for generations. She looked every inch the princess she was born to be, but more importantly, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned the right to wear such symbols. General Kofi, resplendent in military dress covered with medals and decorations, played his role as regent perfectly. He made speeches about the kingdom's strength and prosperity, led the traditional toasts to the memory of the fallen royal family, and graciously acknowledged Princess Amara as our beloved princess, whose safety and happiness are my greatest responsibilities. As the evening progressed, he approached her with what appeared to be spontaneous enthusiasm. "Princess," he said loudly, enough for nearby guests to hear, "I have an idea. Since you have shown such interest in military matters, would you like to join me in reviewing our defensive preparations? We could inspect the guard positions from the old watchtower. It would give you an excellent view of how we protect the palace." To those listening, it seemed like a generous gesture from a regent eager to include the young princess in important matters. But Princess Amara recognized it for what it was, the beginning of her planned execution. "What an excellent idea, General Kofi," she replied with apparent enthusiasm. "I would be honored to accompany you, but given the importance of palace security, perhaps we should invite other members of the council to join us. Elder Kwaku, Captain Jengo, Lord Baru, I'm sure they would all benefit from participating in such an important review." General Kofi's smile became slightly strained. His plan required privacy. Witnesses would make accidents difficult to arrange, but refusing her suggestion would seem suspicious. "Of course," he said smoothly, "though I'm not sure everyone needs to make the climb to the watchtower. The stairs are quite steep, and some of our older council members might find them challenging. Then we'll be extra careful to ensure everyone's safety. After all, we wouldn't want any accidents to mar this wonderful celebration." The group that assembled for the inspection included not just Princess Amara and General Kofi, but Elder Kwaku, Captain Jengo, Lord Baru, and several other nobles whose presence made it impossible for Kofi to carry out his original plan. Frustrated, but unable to withdraw without arousing suspicion, he led them towards the ancient watchtower. What he didn't know was that Princess Amara had spent the day positioning her own supporters throughout the route they would take. Hidden in alcoves and side passages, loyal soldiers and servants waited for signals that would expose the true purpose of this nighttime expedition. As they climbed the narrow stone stairs towards the top of the watchtower, General Kofi found himself in an impossible situation. His plan was ruined, but he was committed to seeing it through somehow. In his desperation, he made a fatal error. He decided to improvise. "Princess," he said as they reached a particularly narrow section of the stairs, "perhaps you should wait here while I check the condition of the upper levels. These old stones can be unreliable, and I would never forgive myself if something happened to you." "How thoughtful," Amara replied, but she made no move to stop climbing. "But I think we'll all be safer if we stay together, don't you? After all, you mentioned that these stairs can be dangerous." It was then that General Kofi made his final, desperate choice. If he couldn't arrange an accident, he would have to create a different kind of situation entirely. His hand moved to the dagger at his belt as he calculated whether he could eliminate Princess Amara quickly enough to claim she had been attacked by hidden assassins. But Princess Amara was waiting for exactly this moment. "Now," she said clearly. Suddenly, the stairway blazed with light as hidden supporters emerged from concealment carrying torches. Captain Jengo and a dozen loyal soldiers appeared both above and below their position, trapping General Kofi in the middle of the stairs with no escape route. "General Kofi," Princess Amara said in a voice that carried the full authority of royal command, "you are under arrest for the murder of my family, for conspiracy against the crown, for corruption in office, and for the attempted assassination of the rightful heir to the throne of Aksum." The evidence she had been gathering for over a year was overwhelming. The servant who had overheard his planning sessions, the documents that proved his involvement in the grain scandal, the testimony of the captured bandits who could link him to other crimes, and now, most damaging of all, his own behavior this very evening, all of it pointed to guilt that could not be denied or explained away. As the torchlight flickered on the ancient stones, General Kofi looked around at the faces surrounding him and realized that his 20-year quest for power had finally come to an end. The child he had dismissed as unworthy of consideration had outplayed him at every turn, using his own arrogance and assumptions against himself. Princess Amara stepped forward, and in the torchlight, she no longer looked like a 13-year-old girl, but like the queen she had always been destined to become. "Take him away," she commanded. "Tomorrow he will face the justice he has avoided for too long." The festival of the new moon had indeed marked a new beginning for the kingdom of Aksum, but not the one General Kofi had planned. As the sun rose over the kingdom of Aksum, its golden light illuminated a palace that had been forever changed by the event of the previous night. Word of General Kofi's arrest spread through the city like wildfire, carried by servants, soldiers, and festival guests who had witnessed the dramatic confrontation on the watchtower stairs. In the great hall where her parents had been murdered just over a year ago, Princess Amara stood before the assembled court to deliver the justice that had been so long delayed. But even in this moment of triumph, she demonstrated the wisdom that had marked every step of her rise to power.
General Kofi was brought forward in chains, his military decorations stripped away, his proud bearing finally broken by the weight of his exposed crimes. The evidence against him filled dozens of scrolls, testimonies, documents, confessions from his conspirators, and proof of corruption that reached back years before the royal massacre. "General Kofi," Princess Amara said, her young voice carrying the authority that came not from age or size, but from absolute moral certainty. "You stand convicted of treason, murder, and conspiracy against the crown. The traditional punishment for these crimes is death by execution, followed by the dishonor of your family name for 7 generations." A hush fell over the great hall. Everyone expected the young princess to claim the blood vengeance that was her right by law and custom. But Princess Amara had not spent a year learning about justice, only to confuse it with revenge. However, I have learned that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy one's enemies, but in the wisdom to show mercy when mercy serves the greater good. You will not die, General Kofi. Instead, you will live stripped of rank, stripped of property, stripped of honor, as a reminder to all that betrayal brings not glory, but shame. She paused, looking directly at the man who had tried to steal her birthright and murder her family. You will spend the rest of your life in exile, walking the fields of distant provinces, earning your bread through the labor of your own hands. And every day of that exile, you will remember that you were defeated not by armies or assassins, but by a child who understood better than you what it truly means to rule. The hall erupted in amazed murmurs. This was justice, but justice tempered with mercy, the mark of a ruler who understood that creating fear was not the same as earning respect. With General Kofi's conspiracy exposed and his supporters either arrested or fled, the question of succession could no longer be avoided or delayed. But Princess Amara had learned too much about the nature of power to simply claim the throne by right of birth alone. People of Aksum, I stand before you as the last daughter of King Janari, the rightful heir to the throne of our ancestors. But I do not ask you to follow me because of my bloodline alone. I ask you to follow me because of what we can build together. What followed was not a speech demanding obedience, but a vision of what the kingdom could become under leadership based on wisdom rather than force, on service rather than domination. I have learned from you all, she continued, gesturing to the nobles, soldiers, and common people who filled the great hall. From the servants who taught me that the smallest details matter most. From the merchants who showed me that prosperity comes from fairness in trade. From the soldiers who demonstrated that true strength protects rather than conquers. From the farmers who proved that patience and hard work yield the greatest harvest. Elder Kwaku stepped forward, his aged voice carrying clearly through the hall. Princess Amara, in my 40 years of service to this kingdom, I have watched many rulers come and go. None have shown such wisdom at such a young age. None have proven themselves through adversity as you have done. If you will accept the crown, I will be the first to pledge my loyalty to Queen Amara of Aksum. One by one, others followed. Captain Jengo knelt and offered his sword in service. The noble lords and ladies bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Even the common people in the hall, servants and crafters who had never before been included in such ceremonies, raised their voices in support. But the moment that truly marked Princess Amara's transformation from child survivor to rightful queen came when she placed upon her head the golden crown that had been worn by her father and his father's father, stretching back through 20 generations of rulers. The crown was too large for her small head, just as the throne was too large for her small frame. But as she stood there, surrounded by people who had chosen to follow her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, no one in the hall doubted that she had grown into both. 3 years later, ambassadors from kingdoms across Africa and beyond would gather in the Great Hall of Aksum to witness something that had never been seen before. A 16-year-old girl presiding over the most prosperous and respected kingdom on the continent. Under Queen Amara's rule, Aksum had not only recovered from the trauma of the royal massacre, but had flourished in ways that surprised even her supporters. The intelligence network she had built as a survival mechanism had evolved into a system for identifying and solving problems before they became crises. The relationships she had cultivated with people at every level of society had created a government that actually understood and responded to the needs of all its citizens. Trade flourished because merchants knew they would be treated fairly. The military remained strong,
but was used primarily for defense and peacekeeping rather than conquest. Schools were established in every major town based on Queen Amara's belief that an educated population was a kingdom's greatest resource. Most remarkably, the example of Axum began to influence neighboring kingdoms. Rulers who had initially planned to take advantage of what they saw as weakness, a kingdom governed by a child, instead found themselves seeking her advice on everything from trade negotiations to military strategy. The girl who had once been dismissed as too young, too small, too weak, had become the most sought-after ally and the most respected voice in regional politics. On the third anniversary of her coronation, as Queen Amara stood on the palace balcony looking out over a kingdom at peace, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from terrified child hidden in secret passages to the powerful ruler she had become. "Nia," she said to her faithful companion, who had never left her side through all the dangers and triumphs, "do you think my parents would be proud of what we have built?" The old servant, now elevated to the position of Queen's counselor, but still the same wise and loving woman who had saved a princess's life, smiled as she watched the bustling city below. "My queen," she replied, "I think they would be amazed not just by what you have accomplished, but by who you have become. You proved that wisdom has nothing to do with age, that strength comes from character rather than size, and that the best leaders are those who serve their people rather than ruling over them." Queen Amara nodded, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of promises kept and duties fulfilled. "And I think," she said softly, "that we've only just begun." The story of the youngest queen in history had become the legend of the greatest ruler Axum had ever known. But more than that, it had become proof that greatness is not determined by the circumstances of one's birth, but by the choices one makes when faced with impossible odds. Princess Amara had been thrown into a situation that should have destroyed her, orphaned, haunted, dismissed and underestimated by everyone around her. Instead, she had used every disadvantage as an opportunity to grow stronger, every setback as a chance to learn something new, every enemy as a teacher who showed her not to rule. In the end, the child who was supposed to be too young to matter taught an entire kingdom and eventually an entire continent what it really meant to lead with wisdom, govern with justice, and rule with love. The youngest queen had become the greatest queen not despite her youth, but because of the unique perspective and unshakable moral foundation that youth had given her. And in the ancient kingdom of Axum, where golden obelisks still touched the sky and trade routes still connected 3 continents, her legacy would endure for generations yet to come, inspiring other young people to believe that age is just a number and that greatness comes to those brave enough to claim it. The legend of Queen Amara was complete, but her story, the story of what happens when intelligence meets opportunity, when wisdom meets power, and when justice finally meets its moment, would echo through history forever.